William Martinez had always been a man of few words. At 68, he spent his mornings tending to the small garden behind their modest home in Sacramento, California. His weathered hands worked the soil with the same gentle precision he had once used as a carpenter for 43 years. Kate, his wife of 45 years, would watch him from the kitchen window as she prepared their breakfast. She knew every movement, every pause, every small smile that crossed his face when the tomatoes were growing well. The doctor's office smelled like disinfectant and worry. Kate sat beside William on the uncomfortable plastic chairs, her hand finding his automatically. They had been here before for routine checkups, but today felt different. Dr. Sarah Chen had called them back urgently after William's recent tests. Kate noticed how William's leg bounced slightly, a nervous habit she had observed only during the most stressful moments of their marriage. When Dr. Chen entered the small examination room, her expression told them everything before she spoke a single word. William had advanced pancreatic cancer. The timeline was measured in months, not years. Kate felt the world tilt sideways as the doctor's voice seemed to come from underwater. Technical terms floated around them like foreign language. Surgery was not an option. Treatment could extend time, but would likely diminish quality of life significantly. William squeezed Kate's hand 3 times. It was their secret code, developed during their early dating years when they were too shy to say "I love you" out loud in public. 3 squeezes meant those 3 words. Kate squeezed back 3 times, then added 1 more for always. They had their own language that needed no translation. The drive home was silent except for the gentle hum of their old Honda. William stared out the passenger window at the familiar streets they had traveled together for decades. Kate gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, her knuckles white against the black plastic. They both knew their world had just changed forever, but neither was ready to speak that reality into existence yet. At home, they moved through their evening routine with careful normalcy. William watched the evening news while Kate prepared dinner. She made his favorite meal without discussing it, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the same recipe she had learned from his mother all those years ago. They ate mostly in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them like a heavy curtain. Later that evening, as they sat on their back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Kate finally broke the silence. She did not ask about treatments or timelines or what comes next. Instead, she asked William to tell her about his favorite memory of them together. He smiled for the first time that day and began to speak about their honeymoon camping trip. When they got lost in the mountains but found the most beautiful lake neither of them had ever seen before or since. That night, lying in bed in the darkness, they held each other without speaking. Kate listened to William's steady breathing and memorized the rhythm. William traced gentle circles on Kate's shoulder, a gesture he had done unconsciously for 4 decades. They both understood that time had suddenly become their most precious possession, and they would not waste a moment of it on words that could not change their situation. The next morning brought a different kind of quiet to their home. It was not the comfortable silence of a long marriage, but the purposeful quiet of 2 people who had decided to live fully in whatever time remained. William still tended his garden, but now Kate joined him, kneeling in the dirt beside him as they planted winter vegetables together. They worked side by side, communicating through glances and small gestures, their hands occasionally brushing as they reached for the same tool. Their adult children lived in different states, building their own lives and families. William and Kate decided to wait before sharing the news. They wanted these early days to belong to just them, to process and adjust before their home filled with worried voices and concerned faces. This was their time to figure out how to say goodbye to the life they had built together, and they needed the space to do it their own way. Friends and neighbors noticed subtle changes but attributed them to the natural progression of aging. William seemed more present during conversations, listening more intently to stories he had heard many times before. Kate began taking more photographs, capturing ordinary moments with unusual attention to detail. Their love had always been quiet and steady, but now it seemed to glow with an intensity that made others pause and notice the way they looked at each other across crowded rooms. 3 weeks after the diagnosis, William began keeping a journal. Not for himself, but for Kate. Every morning before she woke up, he would sit at their small kitchen table with a cup of coffee and write down memories. He wrote about the day they met at the local library when they were both 22. He had been researching home construction techniques, and she was studying for her teaching certificate. When she asked to borrow his pencil, he was so nervous he knocked over his stack of books trying to reach for one in his shirt pocket. Kate discovered the journal by accident when she came downstairs earlier than usual one morning. William quickly closed the notebook, but not before she saw her name written at the top of the page. When she asked about it, he simply said he was writing down things he did not want to forget. Kate understood this was his way of leaving pieces of himself behind for her, and she did not press for details. Some gifts were meant to be discovered later. The autumn days grew shorter and William's energy began to fade more noticeably. He still insisted on their daily walks around the neighborhood, but now they moved slower and rested more frequently on the bench by the small pond where ducks gathered. Kate began bringing breadcrumbs, and they would sit together watching the water ripple as the birds dove for treats. William commented that the ducks seemed to have their own language too, understanding each other without human words getting in the way. Their routine doctor visits became more frequent. Dr. Chen was kind but honest about the progression of the disease. William was losing weight despite Kate's efforts to tempt him with his favorite foods. Pain medication helped but made him drowsy and distant. On his good days, he was still himself. On the difficult days, Kate would read to him from books they had enjoyed together over the years, her voice filling the spaces where conversation used to flow naturally. Kate began sleeping lighter, unconsciously monitoring William's breathing throughout the night. She would wake if his pattern changed or if he stirred restlessly. Sometimes she would find him awake, staring at the ceiling in the gray pre-dawn light. During these moments, she would move closer and rest her head on his shoulder. No words were necessary. They both knew he was practicing for a much longer sleep, and she was practicing for waking up alone. Their son Michael called from Oregon every Sunday evening. Their daughter Sarah video called from Texas twice a week. William and Kate had agreed to tell the children about the diagnosis gradually, sharing information as needed, rather than overwhelming them with the full reality all at once. They explained that William was having some health issues and would need more rest. The children accepted this explanation, trusting their parents to share more details when appropriate. During one of Sarah's video calls, she noticed that her father looked thinner and seemed tired. Kate explained that he had been having some digestive problems and was seeing doctors to figure out the best treatment. This was true even if it was not the complete truth. William waved at the camera from his chair, but let Kate handle most of the conversation. Sarah promised to visit soon for Thanksgiving, still 6 weeks away. The journal entries became shorter as William's strength decreased, but he continued writing every morning that he was able. Some days he could only manage a few sentences about the way Kate hummed while cooking, or how she always left his coffee cup in exactly the right spot on the counter. Other days, he wrote longer passages about holidays they had celebrated or trips they had taken. Each entry ended the same way, with 3 words followed by always, just like their hand signals. Kate began her own kind of preparation, though she could not bring herself to call it that. She organized photo albums and labeled pictures with dates and locations. She cleaned out closets and donated clothes that no longer fit either of them. She updated their important documents and made sure she understood their finances. These tasks felt overwhelming and premature, but she knew William worried about leaving her with complicated paperwork and unfinished business. One afternoon, while William napped in his chair, Kate sat at the kitchen table and wrote her own letter. She wrote to her future self, the woman who would wake up in this house alone. She tried to imagine what that person would need to hear, what comfort she could offer across time. She sealed the letter and put it in the back of her jewelry box, behind the small velvet bag containing her grandmother's wedding ring. Their evenings on the back porch became more precious as the weather turned cooler. Kate would bring blankets and they would sit close together watching the last light fade from the sky. William's garden was finishing its season, but he still checked on the few remaining tomatoes and winter squash. He told Kate which plants to cover if frost was predicted, and which ones were strong enough to survive the first cold snap. These conversations felt like gentle lessons in living without him, though neither of them acknowledged this directly. The silence between them had evolved into something deeper than comfort. It was communication distilled to its most essential form. A raised eyebrow from Kate meant, "Do you need anything?" A slight nod from William meant, "I am okay right now." A particular, way of reaching for each other's hand meant, "I am scared, but I am here with you." They had developed a vocabulary of love that required no translation because they were both fluent in the language of 45 years together. November arrived with an unexpected warmth that made the last roses bloom one final time. William sat in his garden chair, wrapped in the blue cardigan Kate had knitted him 2 Christmases ago, watching her harvest the season's last vegetables. His body had grown frail, but his eyes still followed her movements with the same attention he had given her for decades. Kate moved efficiently among the raised beds, filling a basket with winter squash and the few remaining green tomatoes that would ripen on their kitchen windowsill. The conversation about telling their children the full truth could no longer be postponed. Thanksgiving was 3 weeks away, and both Sarah and Michael were planning to visit with their families. Kate and William knew their son and daughter would immediately recognize that something was seriously wrong. They spent an entire afternoon deciding how to share the news, finally agreeing that honesty delivered with love was better than protective deception that would eventually cause more pain. Kate made the phone calls on a quiet Tuesday evening. Sarah cried and immediately wanted to fly out the next day. Michael went silent for a long time before asking practical questions about treatment options and timelines. Both children wanted to speak with their father, but William asked Kate to tell them he needed a few days to prepare for those conversations. The words felt too heavy for phone calls. He wanted to see their faces when he told them goodbye. The house began to feel different as William's world gradually shrank. He no longer attempted the daily walks that had been part of their routine for 30 years. Instead, he spent mornings by the living room window, watching neighbors pass by on their way to work or school. Kate would bring him coffee and sit with him for a few minutes before beginning her own day. These quiet moments by the window became their new morning ritual, replacing the walks they could no longer take together. Dr. Chen recommended hospice care, explaining that the focus would shift from treating the disease to ensuring comfort and quality of life. William and Kate toured the local hospice facility, but William expressed a strong preference for staying home. Kate worried about her ability to provide adequate care, but William assured her that being together in their own space was more important than medical convenience. They arranged for a hospice nurse to visit twice weekly and for additional support to be available when needed. The journal entries became even more important as William's speaking grew more difficult. Some mornings his voice was barely a whisper, and he needed to rest between sentences, but his handwriting remained steady and clear. He wrote about practical things Kate would need to know: where he kept important papers, which neighbor had the spare key, how to start the lawnmower that sometimes required a specific technique. Mixed with these practical notes were memories and observations that had no purpose except to remind Kate of their shared life. Sarah arrived first, driving straight from the airport to their house without stopping at her hotel. When she saw her father, she could not hide her shock at how much weight he had lost and how frail he appeared. But William smiled his familiar smile and opened his arms for the hug he had been saving for her. They sat together on the couch while Kate prepared lunch, and William listened to Sarah talk about her job and her children and ordinary life events that felt both important and trivial in the context of their goodbye. Michael came 2 days later with his wife and their teenage son. The house suddenly felt full of voices and activity after weeks of increasing quiet. William enjoyed watching his grandson play video games and hearing stories about high school football and college applications. Normal life continued around them, and for brief moments William could almost forget that he was in the process of leaving it all behind. Kate moved through the busy house with practiced efficiency, managing meals and conversations while keeping careful watch over William's energy levels. The family gathered around the dining room table for what everyone understood would be their last Thanksgiving together, though no one said this explicitly. Kate had prepared all of William's favorite dishes, and the familiar smells filled the house with warmth and memory. William managed to eat a few bites of everything, more to participate in the tradition than from hunger. He raised his glass of water in a toast, thanking everyone for coming home and for giving him the gift of seeing them all together one more time. After dinner, while Kate and Sarah cleaned dishes and Michael helped his son with homework, William sat in his chair by the window. The November sun was setting earlier each day, and the bare trees cast long shadows across their neighborhood. He could see the lights beginning to come on in houses where families were settling into their evening routines. The ordinariness of it all struck him as both beautiful and heartbreaking. Life would continue in all these houses after he was gone, just as it had continued before he was born. That evening, the family looked through photo albums together. William pointed out pictures and shared stories that the children had heard many times, but seemed to need to hear again. Kate noticed how he lingered over certain photographs. Their wedding day, the children as babies, family vacations where everyone was laughing at something now forgotten. His finger would trace the edges of these pictures as if he was trying to absorb the memories through touch. Before everyone went to bed, William asked to speak with each of his children privately. These conversations happened in the living room while Kate gave them space, but she could hear the low murmur of voices and occasional tears. William told Sarah and Michael how proud he was of the adults they had become and the families they had built. He shared specific memories of their childhoods that had stayed with him over the years. Most importantly, he asked them to take care of their mother and to remember that love does not end when someone dies. It just changes form. The weekend passed too quickly, filled with quiet conversations and shared meals and the kind of ordinary family time that becomes precious when everyone knows it cannot last. When it was time for the children to leave, the goodbyes took a long time. Everyone hugged a little longer and said, "I love you," more often than usual. William and Kate stood in their doorway, waving until the cars disappeared around the corner, then went back inside to a house that felt both empty and full of love. December arrived with the kind of gray skies that made the house feel smaller and more intimate. William spent most of his time in the living room now, sleeping in the recliner that Kate had positioned to face both the window and the room where she moved through her daily activities. She had learned to read his needs without him asking, when he needed water, when the pain medication was wearing off, when he simply needed her to sit beside him without talking. The hospice nurse, Maria, visited twice a week and had become a gentle presence in their lives. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who understood that her job was as much about supporting Kate as caring for William. Maria taught Kate how to monitor William's breathing and manage his medications. More importantly, she helped Kate understand what to expect in the coming weeks and assured her that she was doing everything right. William's journal entries had become sporadic, limited to days when his hands were steady enough to hold a pen. But on his good days, he still made the effort to write something for Kate. The entries were shorter now, sometimes just a few words, about the way morning light came through their bedroom window or how Kate's laugh still sounded exactly the same as it had when they were young. Each entry was a small gift, wrapped in familiar handwriting and tied with memories. Their conversations had become more essential, stripped of everything unnecessary. William would ask Kate to tell him about her plans for the garden next spring. Kate would describe which vegetables she wanted to plant and where she thought the new roses should go. They both knew he would not see these future gardens, but talking about them was a way of affirming that life would continue and that she would find ways to tend beauty in his absence. One afternoon, while Kate was making tea, William asked her to bring him the small wooden box he kept on his dresser. Inside were items he had collected over the years, ticket stubs from movies they had seen together, a pressed flower from their anniversary dinner last year, the key to their first apartment. He had been saving these small treasures without any specific plan, but now he wanted to share the stories behind each one with Kate while he still could. The pain was becoming more difficult to manage, even with medication. William had good hours and difficult hours, and Kate learned to adjust their rhythm accordingly. During the challenging times, she would sit beside his chair and read aloud from books they had enjoyed together. Her voice seemed to provide comfort, even when he was too tired to follow the story. Sometimes she would read the same chapter multiple times if it helped him rest. Their neighbor, Mrs. Chen, began stopping by with soup and offers to help with grocery shopping. Word had spread quietly through their close-knit neighborhood that William was seriously ill, and people responded with the kind of practical kindness that makes communities feel like family. The mailman asked about William when he did not see him in the garden. The teenage boy next door shoveled their walkway after the first snow without being asked. Kate found herself memorizing details she had taken for granted for decades. The way William's hair stuck up in the morning. the sound he made when he was thinking deeply about something, the particular way he folded the newspaper after reading it. These observations felt urgent now, as if she was trying to save them all before they became only memories instead of daily experiences. Christmas preparations began differently than in previous years. Kate bought a small tree instead of their usual 6-foot Douglas fir. She decorated it with ornaments that held special meaning. The paper angel Sarah had made in first grade, the carved wooden star William had given her on their first Christmas as a married couple. Each decoration carried a story, and hanging them on the tree became a way of reviewing their life together. William insisted that Kate should still buy Christmas presents for their children and grandchildren, just as she did every year. She protested that shopping felt impossible under the circumstances, but William explained that maintaining some normal traditions would be important for everyone. He even helped her choose gifts from his chair, offering suggestions based on conversations they had had with family members during Thanksgiving weekend. The December days were short and often cloudy, but William still liked to sit by the window. During the afternoon hours when the light was strongest, Kate would join him with her knitting or a book, and they would watch the neighborhood settle into winter routines. Children walked home from school bundled in heavy coats. Neighbors scraped ice from their car windshields. The world continued its normal pace while their private world moved in slower motion. On one of his clearer days, William told Kate about a dream he had been having repeatedly. In the dream, they were young again, and camping beside the mountain lake they had discovered during their honeymoon. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the sky so clearly that it was impossible to tell where the lake ended and the heavens began. In the dream, they could stay beside that lake forever, and time moved differently there. Not faster or slower, but in a way that made every moment feel complete and peaceful. Kate listened to William describe this dream and understood that he was trying to share his vision of what comes after life. She did not know if she believed in the same kind of afterlife, but she found comfort in imagining William beside a peaceful lake, free from pain and waiting patiently for her eventual arrival. The dream became something they could both hold on to, a destination rather than an ending. The phone calls with their children became more frequent as Christmas approached. Sarah and Michael both wanted to come for the holiday, but William asked them to wait until after New Year's. He wanted to give Kate one last quiet Christmas in their own home, without the emotional intensity of final goodbyes. They could have family visits later, when everyone was ready for that level of heartbreak and celebration combined. Christmas Eve arrived gray and peaceful. Kate prepared a simple dinner of William's favorite soup and homemade bread. They ate by candlelight at the kitchen table, the same table where they had shared thousands of meals over 4 decades. After dinner, they sat together on the couch and looked at the small tree with its familiar ornaments. William managed to stay awake until midnight, and they held hands as Christmas Day began, marking the passage of time together in comfortable silence. The week between Christmas and New Year felt suspended in time, as if the calendar had paused to allow William and Kate these final days together. William slept more now, sometimes for hours at a time, but when he woke, his eyes would search for Kate immediately. She had arranged her days around his sleeping patterns, staying close enough to respond when he needed her, but far enough away to let him rest without feeling watched. Maria, the hospice nurse, increased her visits to every other day. During her last visit, she gently explained to Kate that William's body was beginning the process of shutting down. His appetite had nearly disappeared, and he was sleeping 18 to 20 hours each day. Maria assured Kate that this was natural, and that William was not in significant pain during these longer sleep periods. The medications were keeping him comfortable, and his breathing remained steady and peaceful. Kate began sleeping on the couch in the living room so she could be near William during the night. She would wake every few hours to check on him, sometimes finding him awake and looking out the window at the streetlights. During these quiet middle-of-the-night moments, they would hold hands without speaking. The darkness seemed to make their connection even stronger, as if removing the distraction of sight allowed them to communicate more directly from heart to heart. The journal had been closed for nearly a week when William surprised Kate by asking for it one more time. His handwriting was shaky and difficult to read, but he managed to write a final entry. It was not a long message, just a few sentences telling Kate that loving her had been the greatest privilege of his life, and that she should not be afraid to live fully after he was gone. He signed it with their secret code, 3 words followed by always, and closed the journal for the last time. New Year's Eve arrived with unexpected snow that blanketed their neighborhood in quiet white. Kate made tea and sat beside William's chair, both of them watching the large flakes fall past their window. William was awake but spoke very little, saving his energy for small gestures and meaningful looks. As midnight approached, Kate wondered if they would see another year together, then realized that such measurements had become meaningless. They were living outside of normal time now, in a space where only love and presence mattered. When the clock struck 12, Kate kissed William's forehead and whispered, "Happy New Year." He squeezed her hand 3 times, and she squeezed back 3 times plus 1. They had welcomed 45 New Years together, and this gentle exchange felt like the perfect way to mark what they both knew would be their last. The fireworks from nearby celebrations seemed distant and unimportant compared to the quiet intimacy of their private goodbye. The first week of January brought a quality of stillness that Kate had never experienced before. William slept almost constantly now, waking only for brief periods when Maria visited or when Kate helped him take his medications. During his waking moments, he seemed to be looking at something beyond the room, as if he could see things that remained invisible to Kate. His breathing had changed, becoming shallower and more irregular, with longer pauses that made Kate hold her own breath until the next one came. Sarah and Michael called every day, sometimes multiple times, asking if they should come immediately. Kate consulted with Maria about the timing, and they agreed to ask the children to wait just a little longer. William seemed to be holding on for some reason, and Kate suspected he wanted to spare his children the intensity of watching him die. This was consistent with his character, even in death. He was trying to protect the people he loved from unnecessary pain. On a Tuesday morning in the second week of January, Kate woke to find William looking directly at her with more clarity than he had shown in days. His eyes were bright and focused, and he seemed more present than he had been in over a week. Maria had warned her that this sometimes happened near the end, a brief return of energy and awareness, that families often interpreted as improvement, but was actually part of the natural dying process. William used this clear time to tell Kate several important things. He reminded her where he had hidden the anniversary gift he had bought for her months earlier, before his diagnosis. He told her to keep paying Mrs. Chen's teenage grandson to shovel their walkway because the boy was saving money for college. Most importantly, he told her that she should not spend too much time missing him because he would always be with her in every garden she planted, every book she read, every quiet morning when she drank her coffee by the window. That afternoon, Kate called Sarah and Michael and told them to come immediately. Something in her voice conveyed the urgency, and both children arranged to fly out that evening. Kate spent the day sitting beside William, sometimes reading to him and sometimes just holding his hand while he slept. The winter sun came through their window at a low angle, creating warm patches of light that moved across the room as the day progressed. William's breathing became more labored as evening approached. Kate could see that each breath required effort, and the pauses between breaths grew longer. She played soft music on their old radio, classical pieces they had listened to during quiet Sunday mornings throughout their marriage. The music seemed to provide comfort, and William's face relaxed into peaceful expression even as his body worked harder to keep going. Maria arrived for an unscheduled visit just as darkness was falling. She checked William's vital signs and spoke quietly with Kate about what to expect in the coming hours. The children would not arrive until late that night, and both Kate and Maria suspected that William might not wait for their arrival. Some people, Maria explained gently, prefer to die quietly without putting their loved ones through the emotional trauma of being present at the exact moment of death. As the evening deepened, Kate turned off all the lights except for a small lamp beside William's chair. The house felt sacred and peaceful, filled with the accumulation of 45 years of shared love and countless ordinary moments that had created an extraordinary life together. Kate positioned her chair as close as possible to William's and took his hand in both of hers, settling in for what she knew would be their final night together. The neighborhood grew quiet as people settled into their evening routines. Through the window, Kate could see lights in other houses where families were watching television, helping children with homework, or cleaning up after dinner. Normal life continued just beyond their walls, while inside their home, time seemed to be moving in slow motion toward an inevitable goodbye that no amount of preparation could make easy. The clock on the mantel chimed 11 times as Kate settled deeper into her chair beside William. His breathing had become the rhythm that governed the entire house, irregular and labored, with pauses that seemed to stretch forever before the next breath came. Kate found herself breathing in sync with him, as if she could somehow help carry the burden of keeping his body going just a little longer. Outside, the January night was clear and cold, with stars visible through their window for the first time in weeks. William's hand in hers felt different now, cooler and somehow lighter, as if he was already beginning to let go of the physical world. Kate talked to him softly, telling him about the plans she had for spring cleaning and how she wanted to plant the flower garden exactly the way he had suggested. She told him it was okay to stop fighting, that she would be all right, that their children were strong and would take care of each other. She gave him permission to leave, even though every cell in her body wanted him to stay. Around midnight, William's eyes opened one last time. He looked directly at Kate with an expression of complete peace and love. No words were necessary because everything that needed to be said had been communicated over 4 decades of shared life. Kate squeezed his hand 3 times, and incredibly, he managed to squeeze back, 3 times, then one more for always. It was their final conversation in the language they had created together, and it contained everything they needed to express about their love and their goodbye. William's breathing became increasingly shallow over the next hour. Kate continued to hold his hand and talk to him softly, sharing memories of their early dating years and their wedding day and the births of their children. She told him about the morning she had realized she was completely and forever in love with him. It was a Tuesday in their 2nd year of marriage when she had watched him fix their broken toaster with such concentrated determination that she suddenly understood she would never love anyone else the way she loved him. At 10 minutes past 1 in the morning, William took a breath that sounded different from the others, deeper and longer, as if he was drawing in enough air for a long journey. Kate held her own breath, waiting for the next one, but it never came. The house fell completely silent, except for the gentle ticking of the mantel clock and the distant hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Kate continued to hold William's hand for several minutes, watching his face in the lamplight and marveling at how peaceful he looked. The silence that filled their home was different from any quiet they had shared during their marriage. It was not the comfortable silence of 2 people who understood each other perfectly, but the profound stillness that comes when half of a conversation ends forever. Kate sat holding William's hand in the gentle lamplight, feeling the weight of 45 years of love settling around her like a warm blanket, even as grief began to bloom in her chest. When Kate finally stood to call Maria and make the necessary phone calls, she noticed that snow had begun falling again outside their window. Large, soft flakes drifted past the streetlights in the same lazy pattern they had watched together on New Year's Eve just 10 days earlier. The world looked clean and peaceful under its white covering, as if nature was providing a gentle backdrop for this most private and sacred of moments. Maria arrived within 30 minutes, moving through their house with quiet efficiency and deep compassion. She helped Kate understand the practical steps that needed to happen next and made the necessary official phone calls, while Kate sat beside William, still holding his hand and talking to him softly. Maria had seen many deaths during her years as a hospice nurse, but she was struck by the profound peace that filled this particular house, as if love had transformed even death into something beautiful. Kate called Sarah and Michael while they were at the airport, waiting for their connecting flights. Both children were devastated that they had not arrived in time, but Kate assured them that their father had died peacefully, and that his last conscious moment had been spent looking at her with complete love and contentment. She told them he had waited as long as he could, and that his final hours had been without pain or distress. Their father had died exactly as he had lived, quietly, peacefully, and surrounded by love. The funeral home arrived as the sun was beginning to rise, and Kate watched from the window as they carefully carried William away from the house where he had lived and loved for so many years. The snow continued to fall, covering his garden and the walkways where they had taken thousands of walks together. Kate realized that she would need to learn how to live in this house alone, but somehow William's presence still felt strong in every room. as if love had a way of outlasting physical death. Later that morning, after Sarah and Michael had arrived and the house had filled with the necessary activities of planning a funeral and notifying friends and family, Kate found herself alone in their bedroom for the first time since William's death. She sat on his side of the bed and opened the journal he had been keeping for her. The final entry, written in shaky handwriting just days before his death, contained the words she would carry with her for the rest of her life. The entry read, "Kate, you have been the greatest gift of my entire existence. Every day with you was better than I deserved. When you miss me, remember that love doesn't end when someone dies, it just changes form. I will be in every sunrise you watch from our kitchen window, every flower that blooms in our garden, every moment when you feel grateful for the beautiful life we built together. Take care of yourself, be happy. Remember that the best parts of me will live forever in your heart." 3 words, always. Kate closed the journal and held it against her chest, feeling the weight of 45 years of shared love and the promise of carrying that love forward into whatever came next. Outside their bedroom window, the snow continued to fall on the quiet neighborhood where they had built their life together. And Kate understood that while William's voice had been silenced, their love story would continue in every memory she carried and every day she chose to live fully in his honor. 3 months after William's death, Kate woke up on a Wednesday morning to discover that she had slept through the night without waking up to check on someone who was no longer there. The realization startled her at first, then filled her with a mixture of relief and guilt. Her body was finally accepting that the hypervigilance of caretaking was over, but part of her felt disloyal for sleeping peacefully while learning to live without him. The funeral had been exactly what William would have wanted: simple, personal, and filled with stories rather than formal speeches. Their pastor had known them for over 20 years and spoke about William's quiet faith and steady character. Sarah had read a poem about gardens and eternal seasons. Michael had shared memories of learning carpentry from his father and the patient. William had taught him to measure twice and cut once. Kate had chosen not to speak publicly, but she had placed William's journal on the table beside his photograph, knowing that his own words were more powerful than anything she could say. Spring arrived early that year, and Kate found herself drawn back to the garden that had been William's greatest joy outside of his family. The winter squash he had planted before his diagnosis was ready for harvest, and Kate gathered the heavy orange and green vegetables with a sense of connection to his careful planning. He had planted this food knowing he would not be there to enjoy it, but trusting that Kate would benefit from his foresight and care. The neighbors had been extraordinary during the difficult months. Mrs. Chen continued to bring soup every Tuesday and had enlisted her grandson to help Kate with yard work she could not manage alone. The mailman always asked how she was doing and took time to chat about the weather or the neighborhood news. These small interactions helped Kate understand that community support could fill some of the empty spaces left by William's absence, even if nothing could replace the unique comfort of his presence. Kate began reading the journal regularly, not all at once but in small portions that felt manageable. William's handwriting was so familiar that reading his words felt almost like having a conversation with him. He had included practical information about home maintenance and seasonal garden tasks, but most of the entries were observations about their daily life together and expressions of gratitude for specific moments they had shared. Reading these entries helped Kate see their marriage through William's eyes and appreciate details she had taken for granted. The anniversary gift William had mentioned during his last clear day turned out to be a small wooden jewelry box he had made in his garage workshop during the autumn months. Inside was a note explaining that he had started the project after his diagnosis, wanting to create something beautiful that would last long after he was gone. The box was perfectly crafted, with smooth edges and a soft felt interior, and Kate understood that every moment he had spent working on it had been an act of love reaching into her future. Sarah and Michael called regularly and visited more frequently than they had when William was alive. The shared experience of losing him had brought the family closer together, and Kate appreciated having people who understood exactly what they had all lost. During their visits, they would often share stories about William that Kate had never heard, memories from their childhood perspectives that added new dimensions to her understanding of the man she had loved for so long. As summer approached, Kate made the decision to plant the garden according to the plans she and William had discussed during his final months. She hired Mrs. Chen's grandson to help with the heavy work of preparing beds and moving soil, but she did the planting herself, following William's careful diagrams and notes. Working in the garden with her hands in the soil he had tended for so many years felt like a form of prayer and remembrance. The tomatoes grew particularly well that summer, producing an abundance of fruit that Kate shared with neighbors and family members. She canned some of the harvest using recipes William had learned from his mother, following the same processes they had used together for decades. The familiar rhythms of summer preservation work provided comfort and continuity, connecting her to both William and the generations of family members who had maintained these traditions before them. On what would have been their 46th wedding anniversary, Kate took flowers to William's grave for the first time since the funeral. She had needed months to work up the emotional strength for this visit, but when she finally stood beside the simple granite stone marked with his name and dates, she felt a sense of peace rather than overwhelming sadness. She told him about the garden and the successful tomato harvest and how their grandson had been accepted to college with a partial scholarship. That evening, Kate sat in William's chair by the window and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. The chair still smelled faintly like him, and sitting there made her feel closer to his presence than anywhere else in the house. As darkness settled over the neighborhood, Kate understood that she had survived the worst of her grief and was beginning to build a different kind of life, one that honored William's memory while allowing her to move forward with purpose and hope. The phone rang as she was getting ready for bed, and Kate smiled when she saw Sarah's name on the caller ID. Their Wednesday evening conversations had become a cherished routine, a way of maintaining family connections across the miles. As Kate settled into her chair to talk with her daughter, she squeezed her own hand 3 times and then once more, a private gesture that reminded her that love truly does not end when someone dies. It just learns to express itself in new ways. Outside her window, the stars were clearly visible in the summer sky, and Kate remembered William's dream about the peaceful lake where time moved differently and every moment felt complete. She did not know if such a place existed, but she had learned that love creates its own kind of eternity, preserving the best parts of people in the hearts of those who survive them. William's voice had been silenced, but their love story continued in every choice Kate made to live fully and find joy in the life they had built together. The world had fallen silent when William died, but Kate had discovered that silence could be filled with gratitude, memory, and the ongoing presence of love that transcends physical death. Their final embrace had indeed spoken what words never could, that 45 years of shared life creates a bond that death can alter but never truly break. In learning to live without William's voice, Kate had found her own strength and the confidence to continue their love story in whatever chapters remained to be written.